You may remember when Senator Fatima Payman
Skivity
quit the Labor Party last year after her decision to cross the floor in support of a Senate motion advocating for the recognition of Palestinian statehood, which was in opposition to the Labor Party's position, led to her essentially being exiled by the party. There was a lot of media coverage of this at the time, including a lot of running commentary from Labor MPs.
Look, if it was me, I was elected as a Labor Senator. I can't sit in that parliament as anything other than a Labor Senator. If I couldn't stick with the Labor caucus, I would leave the parliament.
And prominent Labor figures like Wayne Swan. When she went on to quit Labor, Senator Payman went and sat on the crossbench.
Witnessing our government's indifference to the greatest injustice of our times makes me question the direction the party is taking. Our actions must align with our principles. When history looks back, it must see that we stood on the right side of humanity even when it was difficult. Sadly, I do not believe our principles align with those of the leadership of the Labor Party. With a heavy heart, but a clear conscience, I announce my resignation from the Australian Labor Party. I have informed the Prime Minister that effective immediately, I will sit on the crossbench to represent Western Australia.
Cue all sorts of noise and
hyperbole.
The pile-on was unnecessary and over the top. But cut to today. Greens Senator Dorinda Cox quits the party a couple of weeks after the federal election. Rather than going to sit on the crossbench, though, she decides to join Labor, where she has been welcomed with open arms.
With arms wide open.
I apologise.
Now, all but the most rusted-on observer can surely recognise the hypocrisy at play here.
Fatima Payman, of course, could have put herself before the people of Western Australia and on May 3rd. She chose not to. Dorinda Cox's term is up at the end of this term, and she will have to, if she is pre-selected through ALP processes, put herself forward for election then.
Well, that's a hot take.
What's your response to the Prime Minister's words where he says you should have, run again at the last election we just had, and he draws a distinction with Senator Cox?
Look, some people may call the Prime Minister hypocritical.
Oh, yes. Yes, I would.
I'm just glad that Senator Cox hasn't had to deal with all the name-calling and the smear campaign that I had to deal with. And she and I get along well, so I hope that she has a smoother time than I did.
Look, it's not uncommon for a Polly to quit their party during a parliamentary term, but a majority of the time it happens, they'll hop onto the crossbench. Fatima Payman, Lydia Thorpe and David Van are some recent examples.
The values that Dorinda has are perfectly consistent with the values of the Labor Party.
Jumping from one party to a competing party, especially a month after an election, well, that is a little more unusual. I mean, the timing is interesting, right?
Yeah, the timing, very interesting, isn't it? And it comes about a week and a half after she lost a ballot for Deputy Leader against Maureen Faruqi for the Greens, 9 votes to 3. So the Greens certainly think that is one of the motivations here for Dorinda Cox.
My values and priorities are more aligned with Labor than the Greens.
Weird that she'd suddenly decide her values align with Labor just 2 weeks after unsuccessfully running for Deputy Leader of the Greens and also unsuccessfully running for Deputy Whip.
Very interesting.
Very interesting.
We can't forget that Dorinda Cox wouldn't appear to have the cleanest records either. When you're a politician turning over staff at the rate that Senator Cox appears to, and a number of those staff have lodged formal complaints, well, sooner or later people are going to start asking questions. Not that Albo seemed all that concerned about any of those questions. He seemed quite convinced that all those issues had been dealt with.
We examined everything that had been considered in the past. Those issues were dealt with appropriately. My government has established very clear guidelines, meaning that any issues relating to workplaces and making sure that workplaces are safe are properly examined. They were all dealt with in Senator Cox's case and dealt with appropriately.
Except according to a Greens Party spokesperson, investigations were still ongoing and underway at the time of her resignation from the Greens. Apparently that investigation will now no longer continue given her resignation, so maybe that's what Albo meant when he says the matter had been
All dealt with.
But according to reports, the WA Greens had engaged a law firm to conduct an investigation into the various bullying allegations, but Cox's exit from the party put a premature end to that. Then there's also the complaint that Lydia Thorpe is reported to have made against Senator Cox, which would still appear to be open.
Look, I raised the fact that I did have a complaint in with the Parliamentary Workplace Support Scheme because the Prime Minister of this country told the people of this country that there was no ongoing issues with bullying, and he was wrong. He should have done his homework before he opened his mouth, because there's still an ongoing issue with bullying in the workplace, and there's a lot of work to do, and Labor need to take that seriously. Obviously, if the Prime Minister doesn't even know that there's a problem, then there's a lot of work to do on their end.
Given the nature of her departure, we can probably expect to see more information leak out in the future, like her application to join the Greens a few years back, which really sunk the boot into Labor. Dorinda Cox described Labor as a party that did not authentically engage with its members. She said that she was let down by what she found to be a patronising attitude towards women and people of colour, and that the Labor Party cared more about their election donors than the views of their members.
Ouch.
So let's quickly summarise here. Senator Cox was faced with a string of bullying allegations that were being investigated by a legal firm engaged on behalf of the WA Greens. Senator Cox has had a long history of high staff turnover. Senator Cox is currently the subject of a complaint made against her by former Greens, now independent Senator Lydia Thorpe. A couple of weeks ago, Senator Cox unsuccessfully ran for Deputy Leader of the Greens, and when unsuccessful there, then ran unsuccessfully for Deputy Whip. It's been reported that Senator Cox was also facing the prospect of being dumped to an unwinnable position on the Greens Senate ticket in 2028, which makes a lot of sense given everything we've already mentioned.
My values and priorities are more aligned with Labor than the Greens.
So maybe you believe that all of a sudden, a month after an election, a couple of weeks after running for Greens leadership, with an investigation hanging over her head, maybe you believe that Senator Cox suddenly had a revelation and woke up all of a sudden with her values aligning with those of Labor.
Yeah, sounds a little suspicious.
Because a week prior to jumping ship to Labor, her values clearly didn't align, did they? Look, I would not be surprised if Albo saw this as a fantastic opportunity to pick up another number in the Senate, while at the same time sticking the knife into his mortal Green nemesis. But given the baggage that Cox is bringing with her, it's hard to see how this will really benefit the Labor Party here. I mean, as far as this term goes, it doesn't change a hell of a lot.
They can work with us and fix the problems the country's facing, or they can just tinker and deliver the status quo with the coalition.
Labor will still need the support of either the Greens or the coalition to push anything through. For the Greens, perhaps they're looking at this from the perspective of it solving a problem for them. Their handling of the bullying allegations had been messy. Senator Cox quitting the party has effectively drawn a line through that. Although I'd say they would still do well to reflect on the circumstances that led to the allegations in the first place, as well as to reflect on how they handled them, because there's probably ample room for improvement.
Well, Dorinda spoke for herself yesterday and said that her values aligned more closely with the Labor Party, and people need to have a values fit with the party that they seek to represent. And obviously, what with Labor having decided just this last week to approve an absolute carbon bomb off the coast of WA, which would not only have massive climate impacts, but which would have huge impacts on ancient rock art, those values are not consistent with Greens' values. We've opposed that, but Senator Cox has made her decision that party is a better fit for her, and we wish her nothing but the best.
When did you let Larissa Waters know of this decision, and what was that conversation like?
Yeah, I let Senator Waters know my decision about an hour and a half ago.
If you thought that dysfunction was the domain of the major parties, the Dorinda Cox saga has been a little bit like a case of the Greens saying, "Here, hold my beer." Anyway, senators quitting the party they ran with to get elected. What do I reckon? Labor, the Greens, the Liberals, Nationals, I don't really care. If you run for Senate on a party ballot and you decide to quit the party, you probably should be quitting Parliament as well and handing your spot back to the party that put you there. I understand the rules allow people to stay, but maybe it's time that those rules were reviewed. And before anyone asks in the comments, for what it's worth, I think that once Senator Payman quit the Labor Party, she should probably have quit the Senate as well. And I say that not based on the position that she took, because personally, I believe that if you're standing up to oppose a genocide, you're probably going to end up on the right side of history. I say that she should have quit the Senate purely due to the fact that she, like Dorinda Cox, was elected to the Senate on a party ticket. I'd actually argue that Senator Payman should never have been put in a position where she felt it necessary to quit the Labor Party in the first place. The reality is her position in crossing the floor was entirely consistent with the Labor Party's own national platform, which calls on the Australian government to recognise Palestine as a state. In other words, it appears that it was the Labor caucus, and not Senator Payman, that appear to have gone against the national platform. When it comes to Senator Payman quitting Labor, I can respect her position. She stood for something. She quit the party on principle. Well, I can respect that. I think a lot of people probably can respect that. What I can't respect is someone jumping ship in a desperate and opportunistic attempt to prolong their political career. Someone who's willing to check their principles at the door if it'll help secure them another 6-year term in the Senate. Making a move that appears more motivated by self-preservation and self-interest than standing for something more. For me, they're not desirable traits in a politician. They may not be all that uncommon, but really not all that desirable. And for me, the other thing this little drama highlights is that if you want to be a member of the Labor Party, you're expected to fall in line, a point the Prime Minister made abundantly clear.
Dorinda Cox understands that being a member of the Labor Party means that she will support positions that are made by the Labor Party.
For someone like Senator Cox, this makes her look, well, a little bit soulless, I guess. One week she's releasing a joint statement blasting Labor's new Environment Minister as having, and I quote, spectacularly failed his first test in the job after approving the climate-wrecking North West Shelf dirty gas extension to 2070. The next week she's defending him.
Do you support then the government's decision to approve the North West Shelf extension?
Well, I think that the provisional approval done by Minister Watt, I believe, is still in train, and it wouldn't be suitable for me to have public commentary during that stage.
I mean, you were quite adamant when you were at the Greens, though, that there was no way that project should go ahead. So how do you get behind a government that's now putting forward a path for that to go ahead?
Well, again, it wouldn't be for me to make public commentary, particularly during the provisional approval stage. My understanding is that Woodside do need to come back to Minister Watt, and obviously I will be working with the Labor government now to ensure that we tread a pathway forward in ensuring that there's a delivery of what's required for the Australian public, particularly for the West Australian public, and to make sure that we are doing that in partnership with them.
Will you be listening to traditional owners who say ancient rock art at Moorooga will be stripped from them with the extension of this approval?
Well, again, I would need to look at the provisional approval that's been made by Minister Watt. Again, I wouldn't like to make any public commentary on what those restrictions are, and I think we need to be clear about that before I can actually get into a policy debate about it.
That's Olympic-level flip-flopping.
The climate science spells it out clearly. We must say no to new fossil fuels and no to public money being given to these fossil fuel projects for expansion or the opening of new ones. But we know that the government struggles when made to choose between their strong climate action commitment and lining the pockets of corporate donors in the fossil fuel industry.
I'll be keenly watching to see if Senator Cox's defection does prolong her political life, if selling out her principles is enough to secure her another 6-year term on a senator's salary. And for Labor, I wonder if they've just picked up a ticking time bomb that's just as likely to blow up in their faces sometime down the track.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.